On this episode of Industry Relations, I interview Rob about his new venture, DPX. Let's go. This is Industry Relations, a podcast that's at the intersection of real estate and technology from an insider's perspective, with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Industry Relations with Rob and Greg. If you are watching us on video, today is Hat Day, and I am your host, the Notorious Rob, and with me, as always, Fab Robertson.
Oh God, Fab.
Fab.
Oh my God, the fabulous Greg Robertson. Not to be termed the Fab ever. Okay.
Yeah.
Hola, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And as we talked about in the pre-show, this will be a weird show, right? It's going to be a strange show because Greg really wants to talk about DPX. He wants to talk about the company that I announced. So obviously, I'm happy to talk about it, but I don't think I'm going to do it as a co-host. That seems weird. So we're going to do this almost more like Greg interviewing me. And so in case anyone listening doesn't know, because of the court case, and the ruling by Judge Woods that exempted auctions, I felt like I had to talk about auctions. And if I'm going to do that, then I think ethically as a blogger, I should disclose the fact that I have this sort of a conflict of interest in that I've been working on an auction-based platform for over a year. So we did it. Greg's like, I want to talk about it because it's kind of an interesting concept. I think so. There's a lot of questions, lots of things to talk about. So we're going to do that. But everyone knows this is not meant to be like some promo thing for my company. It is actually relevant to industry relations, but I'm going to take kind of a guest role on this podcast. So with that said, let me introduce you to the host of Industry Relations, Fab Robertson, everybody. Woo!
Still going that way. Well, you are way more concerned about this kind of shameless promotion than I am, right? So it's like, we've talked before about this. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you talking about the things that you're doing. I mean, part of this whole thing, I think, is somewhat of your personality, right? So people want to know what you're doing. So it's great, that you have this kind of line in the sand here, but I mean, I for one think it's totally unnecessary, but
thank you.
I think I've been very interested. I've gotten a sneak peek of this before, and then we've talked about it a lot. And I've read your last post here announcing it, which is the concisest thing I've read. So I would encourage people to go. Well, based upon the iterations I've gone through, right? Yeah.
That and the average length of my posts.
Yeah. And it started over here. And like, I think you're kind of really, getting to what the job this is, the job's to be done of this.
Correct.
What problem it's solving.
Right.
But let's start from here. When did this well, let's start from here. Like, what's your elevator pitch for DPX?
The elevator pitch is we are an auction-based multiple listing service.
Okay.
That's we're an auction-based multiple listing service that allows full service professional agents to offer their services for 0% listings.
Okay, fantastic. When did you first, and we'll get into that there is some sort of compensation in this model, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
When did this kind of idea strike you? In this kind of format because to me, the biggest kind of the things that are being connected that I don't think have been connected before. Well, I know they haven't, is the idea of an auction and an MLS, right? So when did that kind of concept start first bubbling in your head?
So, obviously as a consultant really in the industry, I've known about auctions. There have been a lot of companies that have tried it and it never really worked out, right? Part of it, I think it began really in 21, right? When we were going through that insane market. And I'm hearing story after story of like buyer agents writing up 13, 14 offers and, getting denied and then not knowing why. It's like, we made this offer. It's 20,000 over asking. Didn't get it. So you call the listing agent and you're like, so what happened? Why didn't we get it? No answer, no response, right? So the buyer's heartbroken, but they don't know why. Or sometimes you get a response like, yeah, you got outbid by $5,000. It's like, my client would have paid $10,000. Why didn't we have an opportunity? So we've heard that for about a year. At the same time, um, as you know, in 21, I got heavy into the blockchain crypto thing because I felt like this technology is something special. Like I don't know how it's going to change the world. I just know it's going to. So I started looking at different ways where that technology could be applied to our industry, to real estate, right? And I know there are companies like Propy that's doing really interesting work around sort of doing purchases on the blockchain using crypto. There are companies like oh god, what's Roofstock I think is doing like or there are a bunch of companies that are doing like tokenization of real estate and essentially tokenized REITs for investors, etc. But I just didn't really grab me. Um, but I got really involved in this notion of like decentralized real estate, decentralized ledgers, decentralized computing, and how it's going to apply to real estate. And I felt like one of the challenges of that was going to be it's hard to build innovative systems on top of existing MLSs, right? Not because the MLS themselves are evil or anything. It's just because the MLSs are creatures of like 1940s. You know what I mean? And there's all these rules and all this regulation that makes it very
Right.
hard for a startup to sort of try and navigate that. Those two sort of came together. Okay. So on the one hand, I felt like auctions are the best way of doing real estate transactions. I still believe that. Now there are people who argue with me around it, but I'm like, the current process that we have, these, sort of offer and acceptance, right? It essentially is kind of a blind bidding auction. It kind of is an auction, but it isn't, right? What I thought about it was that system was the best and most transparent process when it was invented in the 1930s. You know what I mean? Like in the 30s and 40s, when like, you're selling telegraphs, then yeah, having a single, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's not exaggeration.
Yeah,
like, like having a single kind of book, because back then the MLS was a book, right?
right.
Where all the sellers, all the listing agents say, here are the properties for sale, and then buyer agents were able to go in and see everything else for sale and communicate with their buyers, be like, hey, let me help you. Here's all the things for sale, and then the offer and acceptance process. I mean, that's the best, most transparent, fairest system for the technology of that time. I'm just saying here we're in 2023. The internet exists, APIs exist, all this exists. It's outdated. And I think open auctions are actually possible and feasible, and it was time to do it. Anyway,
yeah,
I went too long, but that was the motivation behind it.
No, and I think so from my gathering of reading and knowing what your kind of evolution here is that um you don't want anybody to be scared off by the crypto blockchain, whatever.
Correct.
That's a back end thing, right?
Correct.
It's the real focus is on the real focus is on this auction based platform.
That's right.
How everything else below that is just
that's right.
A different way of doing it. But let me ask you a question here.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear you what you're saying here, but why isn't this just better solved by adding an offer management software on top of the existing MLSs, right? That right. could increase transparency.
So to me, the transparency goes both ways, right? So the thing about auctions, and so take a look at take an example, Open. Literally, it's OPENN. They implemented this with, I think it's Toronto. It might be Korea as a whole. It is exactly what you said.
They're starting to do it in I think in Canada with Korea,
correct.
Right? And right. I think they're also huge in Australia, right? So
correct.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing: Australia auctions are very, very common. So Open initially is an auction company, and I know those guys, and I've talked to them about, hey, should we partner? We'll see. I mean, that might come down the pike. But when they came to North America, they didn't go down the auction route because they knew it was going to be very, very difficult, right? So they went with offer management. And the answer to your question to me is it's not enough transparency. So the feature about auctions that I think is really, really awesome is as a buyer, I know that if I'm the high bid, I win, right? With offer management, I could be the high bid and still not win, right? So that was the one of the things I really wanted to fix. As a buyer, I should know if I'm the high bid, I got the house. There are no heartbreaks, right? There's no, I'm in the top two and I didn't get the house. Oh my God, sorry, honey. Like we didn't get our dream house. There's none of that. If you want the house, you keep bidding until you are the high bid. And if you're the high bid, you got the house.
Let me push back on that though. Let me push back on that a bit.
Please.
You know, high bid, right? What you're talking about, it sounds like, is a monetary, economic kind of consideration, right? We all know in real estate, there's more than economic decisions to make, right? You know, absolutely, a cash offer in some cases is, you know, the gold standard or whatever,
that's right?
But if they're confident that, you know, maybe it's a Google exec that's making $500,000 a year that wants to bid, you know,
more, right?
More, or, you know, or it's, you know, or you know, for whatever reason, it's less because you don't believe the other guy.
Right.
Sometimes that high economic value is something that may not be accepted for other reasons.
Sure.
Right? It might
absolutely.
it might come with a contingency. It might come with, you know, other reasons. So when you mean the highest bid is always going to win,
right?
What's defining about high, right? What does high mean?
Yeah, no, I think that's an exact point. Thanks for asking that question, essentially. I feel like you teed it up. So one of the reasons why auctions didn't really take off in real estate is exactly to your point. If we're talking about like widgets on eBay, that's all about just $1, right? It's just about the price. If you're talking about a commodity, it's just price. So it's easy to do auctions. With real estate, there's all these non-financial terms. That's what we call them, right? To your point, maybe I'm a seller and I really value closing fast. Right. You know, if you could close in 10 days, that way I don't have to pay another month's of mortgage, that's worth something to me. Other sellers could be like, I'm not ready to move. Right. So even after we close, I need a 60-day close, you know, so I could pack up. And it's all individual. Something like waiving inspection, you know, is that worth something?
Yeah, exactly.
There's all these non-financial terms. So to me, there's two real innovations that we are doing at DPX. At Decentre PX. One is we are allowing the seller to put dollar values on those non-financial terms, or simply say, I'm requiring this non-financial term or I'm not allowing it. So for example, let's say I'm a seller and I just don't want any buyer who has a sales contingency because I don't want that uncertainty, right? Then you could go in our system when you list it with your listing agent, you would just check buyer sale contingency, not allowed. Now, the transparency there is, as a buyer, I come in now, I look at this house and I say, oh, this looks like a really great house. I look at the terms, it says, oh, they're not allowing sale contingency. Well, I have to sell my house. You know what? I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to bid on this. There's no point in wasting my time or my agent's time writing up an offer and there's a sale contingency and the seller's like, screw you. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's much more efficient that way. So to me, when we talk about high bid in DPX, it's the sale price plus all of the values based on the seller. Now, why do we go that way? When we were developing this, we talked to a lot of agents, a lot of real top producing agents. And what they told me was, look, in the current today's process, in a multiple bid situation, they all put together a net sheet. Right? And they all analyze each offer and they put all the various terms and they take it to the seller and say, okay, here you go, Mr. Seller. And a lot of times the conversation will go something like, this offer here is $10,000 less than this other offer, but they're waiving appraisal. They're doing certain things. Are you willing to take $10,000 less to get this offer? That's the way they talk to their sellers about it today. So all we've done is to say, you know what, have that conversation up front, right? Have that conversation up front, and then you could assign values to those non-financial offers. So the high bid in our system is a high bid that's a combination of the price as well as these terms.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, any monetary value they're going to put on these what do you call them?
Correct. Non-financial terms.
Non-financial terms. It's going to be subjective, right? So,
exactly. Exactly.
It's going to be what the seller deems that.
Exactly.
Right.
In consultation with the listing agent. That's important, right?
Right. Okay. Sure. I mean, that's a brand new CMA in a sense, right? Like
in a sense,
coming up with it's not like what, one has a pool, one doesn't have a pool. What's the value of a pool, right? I mean, you can kind of see that through different comps and such, but, in this case though, I mean, I see both things. I see, to me, the cleaner way is just to put in there, this is what I'm selling. Mm-hmm. These are the terms. Right. Make me a bid. I get that 100% because that makes it cleaner, but you are kind of limiting the buyer pool a little bit because who knows, right? On the other side, you have this subjective information that, anything else, because I'm not sure about that, because I think a lot of realtors will tell you it's all that negotiating. Like, the seller's hard firm. I'm not getting out of here in 60 days. But when this motherfucker says, I'm going to pay you $50,000 more than you thought for, well, right. You know what? Sometimes he's going to change his mind.
Sure.
Right. Because, and in this case, it seems like, there's that back and forth, which may be advantageous. You've kind of taken out of the equation here, right? I mean, that could have.
Look, so the way I look at it is, I'm pretty convinced that open auctions are the best way of doing things. But maybe there are some edge cases where some agent says, well, I'm, to your point, like, you could say I'm not moving for 60 days until somebody comes up with $100,000 over asking.
Right.
Look, I mean, my take on it is then you should probably put in there, I don't know, 60-day close is worth $100,000 to me. Like,
right.
And have somebody come in and say, all right, I still want your house. I'm going to bid this, right? And then, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not clicking that, but I'm just going to pay you $100,000 more.
So in this case, who is the person that's making, I know that the listing is probably between the seller and the seller's agent.
That's right.
How to craft this out. What's the strategy here? That makes sense.
That's right.
On the buy side, who's logging into the system making these bids?
Right now, it's the buyer agent. Yeah.
The buyer agent.
Right now, it's the buyer agent. Because like I said, we are fundamentally an MLS. We're not a consumer website. We have no intention of being a consumer website, right?
Right.
Like, we want to we just want this model, the auction model, open auction model, which we believe is the best way to kind of get out there, right?
Yeah,
so, like, in fact, like, we're in talks with MLSs to be like, hey, let us power your auction feature for your convenience for your members, right? Because we don't care.
Let me go down this thread a little bit though. So the buyer's agent is making that bid.
Correct.
Is there a text field that the buyer can say, hey, we're willing to pay this, but put in some,
Nope.
So it's only economic, right?
It's only economics. It's just what terms are you willing to accept? What terms are you not willing to accept? Right. But the real advantage here, to me, is
but why not a little bit of like back and forth there? Like, hey, my buyer's willing to bid this much, but really, we need an extra 10 days, right? I mean, that
because
might be.
You can't. So there's two answers. One is technologically, maybe with advances in AI, we can get to that level, but I don't know how to rank that.
Well, it's not I don't think it's a rank thing. It's like whether
it's a rank thing for auction.
Well, hold on. For me though, that, why I was starting off with like, what's the high offer? I would maybe consider like a copy change of what's the best offer, right? High denotes to me a variable based upon a number, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Best to me is,
all these subjective factors.
All these, but it's all subject. Actually, are not objective, but subjective in some cases, right? So I mean, it's just my little thing.
Yeah, no, I get you.
It complicates it for sure. And what I do like what you're saying is, I think having constraints, especially in these kind of things, helps things out a lot, because the problem with the modern day MLS system is, it's too much choice, right? It's just
almost.
It's a product not designed by a committee, but by committees after committees after committees,
which was born from the 1930s.
Yeah.
And
so
we haven't updated, right? So here's the thing.
It's real simple. I'm trying to like already poke holes when maybe something as simple and elegant as this is probably just the way to start it.
No, and I get you, Greg. Like, to me, it really was come down to the important thing here is we needed the buyer to have certainty. We need the buyer to know, if I'm the high bid, I get this house. Right. So if my wife loves this house, this is our dream house, and I put it, then let's say the CMA, because I'm working with my buyer. My buyer is just like, listen, man, this house worth $500,000. Right. Don't bid over $500,000. Right. And I get outbid. It's $505,000. I'm going to go, hey, honey, how much do we love this house? We love this house. I could see little Johnny playing in the back. $510,000. You get outbid, $515,000. 520, right? And you know what? You're gonna bid until you just can't, and
Right.
then it's not heartbreak the way that we have it in the current system, where
Right.
sorry you didn't get
Right.
the house, you got to like you say, hey, you know what? We love this house, but we can't afford it anymore. We're out. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
No, and
It's for
I get it. I mean, I do get it. I
yeah,
love opinionated software. I
yeah,
love somebody behind that thing saying, this is
right,
this is the way we're doing it. I mean,
right.
and you have to start
Right.
somewhere.
But there's a
You
second
can
part to this, right?
Okay.
The second part to this, if you think about the real estate transaction, here's what we're not doing. Okay. We're not doing, we're going to close the transaction on our site. Right? We're not doing, you're going to wire money to us. Like, we're not doing any of that because what we're doing is producing essentially the contract, the sale contract, right? Where you have matched the buyer and the seller. And in real estate, man, as you know, there's so much that happens between contract and close. So a lot of those, detailed negotiations.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? We won the house, but really, we really need another 10 days,
Or the
right?
chandelier. We want the
Or
chandelier
whatever.
or
And then you go
whatever.
back
Yeah.
and forth, and then that
Yeah.
negotiation doesn't change. The buyer agent, the listing agent will negotiate. Hey, you know what? The seller is willing to grant you another 10 days. You're going to need to pay $1,000 more, or whatever, right?
Right.
Whatever they come up with, right? So we're preserving that. And then the closing itself, we don't see any reason why we need to mess with that. Like title and escrow, lawyers, that all work just fine today. Wire transfers, all like, so to me, we don't need to mess with sort of the settlement and the closing. We just needed to get to certainty for the buyer along with transparency, certainty for the seller that they got the highest market price possible, and then let the agents who do what they do best, let the system work. So all I'm saying is like when there are these sort of real detailed kind of things that are all inevitably going to come up, inevitably inspection report come back and there'll be something, and inevitably the agents have to negotiate that out between the two people, right? All we're saying is just the offer and acceptance process that should be done via open auction, and we can do that for them. So
Okay.
that's the
So then
first real innovation that I think we're trying to
right.
introduce. Is it going to work? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Right.
But why? I mean, I know on the surface you're saying you've seen these before,
Yeah.
but you're by making it an MLS, you
Right.
think it'll be successful. But when I think of like an MLS, just on
Right.
a system, an MLS system, a modern MLS system platform,
Mm-hmm.
what can I do on that? I can search listings. I can do CMAs.
Yep.
I can set up listing alerts.
Yep.
I can, on the search set, I can search via map. I can, I can follow different properties to see,
Yep.
what's going on with them. I can also link to some sort of public records database to look at
Yep.
that. I mean, why, it seems, I mean, I understand that this is like this is like more of an enhancement to a module that did, like if I look back at like what Cloud CMA is, we looked at the reports, the output
Mm-hmm.
of most MLS systems, and they still looked like the old books from the past.
Right.
We wanted to generate something that gave more of a personalization and
Right.
customization to the MLS data.
Right.
And that's a separate app, right? So
Right.
we focused on one thing that the MLS didn't do that great.
Right.
The MLS system didn't, and then, really expanded on that.
Right.
We didn't have to be an MLS system to do that. Why do you feel the need? Why can't this just be, an auction platform that is supplemental or complements whatever MLS system out there? Why do you have to call yourself an MLS?
Well, it's not that we're calling we literally are an MLS, and there are a bunch of reasons, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that the average MLS has 160 pages of rules, and a lot of those rules make it very, very difficult to do something like auction. And some MLS still allow it, but it just makes it very hard. There are all these different rules that you just have to jump through, and in a lot of cases, Greg, MLSs don't allow auctions. And there's something I saw, like Dorsey as an example, right? Auction platform, try to do this, failed. Because what they were running into, and I happen to know this for a fact, Sonny was like their consultant. I did a meeting with them. Like they were running into problems like the MLS would say, you can't list this until you have these 17 data fields. And like, we're an auction, we don't have those data fields. Well, and then you just spend months spinning your wheels, like trying to do that. And I'm like, what I've basically determined was there's no way to launch a new innovative sort of technology-based solution and comply with all of the MLS rules, right? So by being an MLS ourselves, we just don't have those rules. We don't deal with them. We're not NAR.
Yeah, but if you're a third-party
things,
software product, you don't have to have any rules anyway. There's no rules that I have to follow.
The data feed you get from the MLS comes with rules.
That's true.
You're limited to what you can and cannot do with data. We don't have that.
Right.
And we can't have that. Right. So like I said, I mean,
it's never going to be, so this goes to my second point. This is never going to be in competition with other MLSs, right? This is more of an alternative or something that's in parallel to other MLSs.
That's how I envision it. But at the same time, I do think one of my things, as you know, Chris, like my entire career has been advising MLSs. Right? Part of my motivation for doing this is after 12 years of working with MLSs, I feel like a lot of them, the executives know what they want to do and they can't do it.
Right.
And as a consultant, it's just time after I submit plans, I submit strategies, decks. Here's what you should do. The CEOs buy it, everyone buys into, board buys it, and they can't execute. They can't do it because of some politics, some whatever. And I felt like really what I wanted to do was show the MLSs instead of just tell them, right? Just telling them, here's advice. I actually want to show them this is how it should be. I'll give you an example of this. You mentioned an MLS system is like this, right? And yet Cloud CMA exists because the existing CMA in the MLS isn't that great. My take on it is the MLS system shouldn't have a CMA. So our system does not have a CMA. Why? Instead, we just have data APIs. Why? Because Cloud CMA exists. Why do we need to mess with the CMA? Public records, sure, we have that, and we do in fact have that, right? But some of the drip email type stuff, for example, right? Listing alerts. Dude, there's so much software out there that can do that way better than whatever MLS system does. Why do we have to build that, right? In fact, the only thing we have to build is data output and say to vendors, say to prop tech people, build a listing alert system, right? We're not going to mess with you. We're not going to make you jump through hoops. We're not going to do the provisioning dance. We're not doing any of that. Come get an API key, hit our APIs, take the data and do whatever you want with it. Now, right now, we don't have any data for them to take. Right? So that's the
right.
But at some point we will, right? And to whatever extent we have it, we'll give it to them. So it's if you remember a few years back, we talked about the open source MLS and modular MLS and all that. I've been talking to MLS about that for years. None of them can do it. So my decision with DPX is let us show you how it can be done.
Right. So I guess I'm kind of grokking this a little bit. So it's like, let's blow up what we know an MLS is right now. And the premise, I guess, to me, the modern MLS system now is really based upon search. Right.
It's based upon a catalog. Yeah. If you think about the MLS,
a catalog that you can search listings on, right? So, I mean, that's still an important thing, right? But that in itself, from your standpoint, let me put it this way. Is it valid for an MLS system software to provide a way of searching listings that are inputted into it?
Yeah, sure, it's valid, but here's my take. I mean, and you're the best person to talk about this. You have a product called Cloud MLX.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, again, what we always try to do is give an enhancement or a complement to things that are currently done, a new way of thinking about how to do that.
But Greg, it's beyond that. You know, and I know we've bitched about it enough and, openly on this podcast, right? I'm sorry, but the core logic matrix search system is asinine. It's not good. And they know it, right? So that's why Cloud MLX exists, because it's a better search experience. My take on it is, we have to offer search because you have to, right? You have to allow people to do it. Am I going to spend enormous resources and money improving the search experience? No. Why? Because Cloud MLX exists. I'd rather just give you the data feed and be like, you go build a search interface.
Right. Okay. So let me try this a second time. So the MLS should be a database with APIs, and then independent developers like you guys and us will make the tools based upon that data, right?
Yes.
And the MLS goes back to compliance, making sure all that data is good and good and everything else.
Sure.
Now, so you have like, an MLS doing that right now. You come into the market, right? You don't really have as much listings as that, right? Would you ever imagine that, you would, and you would say to somebody, well, I can't do a CMA on this. And like, yeah, I would use cloud CMA, or I would use, whatever else. That would be your answer to this. Right. So you're kind of just, so again, like that goes back to my original point though. It's like, it's not, why do you have to be an MLS? It could just be a cloud MLS. It could just be a showing time. It could just be, another tool that's connected. Why do you have to go through?
The simple answer, Greg, is because the MLSs have too many rules, and
they want to rule. I mean, but
they have too many rules.
Okay, but you don't. But you're not going to have any rules. You're not taking a feed from the MLS, right?
But I have to comply with those rules
as an MLS.
No, like even if I take a data feed from somebody else and it comes with rules, I have to comply with them.
Right.
And if those rules make it impossible for me to do what I want to do from a technology standpoint, I can't do it.
But I mean, that could be a constraint that you can tell people like, we're never going to take any other data from MLSs.
But here, let me give you the perfect example of this, right? Which is the second big innovation, which is that we don't have cooperation and compensation, right? Because we talked about compensation piece.
Yeah.
We don't have commissions on DPX, right? And that's the other thing. I can't imagine it. Like going to MLS and say, hey, you know what, give us your data, but we're going to eliminate cooperation compensation. Like, who the hell are we to do that?
But right? You're not actively right now asking for data, are you? I mean, you're going to brokers and saying, hey, use my platform to do that.
As a second MLS. But in our MLS, there's no cooperation compensation, right? And this is the other reason to do the MLS. And this is strategically really important to the industry. Instead, what we do is we charge a buyer premium because we're an auction site.
Right.
The traditional MLS can't charge a buyer premium. What's your justification for doing that, right? Whereas we're an auction site, and every auction site on the planet charges a buyer premium, right? Bring a trailer, concierge auctions, whatever, 10x, like they all charge a buyer premium. We're going to charge a buyer premium to the buyer, and then we're going to take that buyer premium and compensate the agents that are involved, right? And the seller pays no commission. To do that, you cannot do that while being on top of an existing MLS, because the existing MLS is all about cooperation and compensation. Like it's written into their charter.
Right. But I mean, even if you're like, let's say you're a third party app here. Let's say you have an app, it's in this marketplace app, just to give it a general kind of thing.
Sure.
Here. I'm a broker. I'm like, hey, I think I love what Rob is doing here.
Sure.
And I want to put my listings, I've got them on the MLS over here, but I'm going to put my listings on this DPX as well.
Right.
There's nothing, a broker can contact their MLS and say, they might even be able to do this on the MLS system themselves with an export file and say, these are my listings. I'm going to download them to an Excel file.
Yep.
And I'm going to upload them into DPX.
Yep.
There's no rules that are associated with that. That's the broker's own data. They don't have to, DPX doesn't have to agree. The broker doesn't have to agree to having that. They can just do that without having to worry about these rules that are, and you can continue on going, hey, if you just want to start here and not put it on the other MLS, here are some benefits. Sure.
Oh no, we don't tell them not to put it. No, put in the other MLS. But, you're a member of that fine. MLS.
But again, I guess I'm still not grokking.
What you're not grokking is, okay, that's fine. You do all of that. At the end of it, there's a closing. Right. You're the listing agent. You're the listing broker. Does your seller owe you a commission, and then do you owe cooperation compensation to the buyer agent?
It depends. If they bought on your platform,
they do not.
Specifically, if they didn't.
No, so I'm saying if they bought through our platform, but we're not the MLS, how are you not owing a commission? Because your MLS rules say you will cooperate and compensate.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, let me walk this through my head. So, if you're you're saying if you're a third party app and they use you as a marketplace, right? And both the buyer's agent and the seller's agent use your app and they come
Right.
up with a price, right?
Then they owe a commission.
Okay,
because you're part of the MLS that has cooperation compensation.
Okay, so in order for yours to work, they can't list it on the other MLS.
No, they can. But what I'm saying is then they're doing it through our system and we are an MLS. So it's like having
I must be stupid here because
No, it's like, so think about Atlanta, right? They have two MLSs, FMLS and Georgia MLS, right? Every agent puts the listing into both MLSs. Now, those two happen to have the same compensation rules, but if one has a different rule and you process transaction through that, then you comply with the rules of that MLS. What you can't do is go do a deal on Greg Robertson's app that takes data from the existing MLS and all of the people have to obey the rules of that MLS and then say you don't have to pay a commission. Like, you don't have that right.
Right.
So you're just a prop tech vendor.
The organization of the MLS is what the way that's structured for some reason trumps any other place you put it on.
That was the thing. You have to be an MLS if you're going to talk about compensation.
Right.
Right. And for us, it was important to move this because, as you know, as our last episode, showed, I've been following the commission law since 2019. I'm like, this thing is a fucking monster. How can I save the industry? How do we preserve compensation? The Waze auctions, man. The Waze auctions, Waze buy a premium. And the only way to do any of that is to become our own MLS. Right? Yeah. Now, are we competitive with that? No, we're not, because we don't charge a. We're like, no, stay with the other MLS. That provides enormous value. Do all that. All we're saying is use us for the transaction.
Yeah, no, I think I'm understanding that it's because the way it's structured, that organization is structured, then you don't have to adhere to
that's right
those rules. That's okay. I get that. Okay, and we don't have a lot of time here, and I know we could go down a rabbit hole, but I really want to give people a good understanding. So walk me through this buyer's fee, right? Or what, how there is some sort of compensation here.
That's right.
I think that's very unique as well.
That's right. So that's the second big thing that we did was there's no commission on our platform. Our MLS says there's no cooperation compensation. And if you do a transaction through our MLS, you buyer agents, you listing agents will waive all other commission claims. Like, that's part of the terms of use.
Right.
However, the buyer is going to pay a buyer premium that happens to be basically the same as the commission rate, right? Nationwide, that's 5%. Okay. I mean, in some markets it's more, some markets less, but let's just go with 5%.
Yeah.
The buyer has the high bid, right? Which has the price of, say, $500,000 plus whatever terms. So you won. Congratulations. You're going to add 5% buyer premium to that. And the price in the contract, the final sale price in the contract will then be $525,000. Okay.
Right.
We take the $25,000 as buyer premium as an auction website, and then we split that between the listing agent and the buyer agent, $12,500 each. Well, less than that because we have to take our VIG, if you will, but we got to stay in business, and that's it.
Yeah, and what is DPX? What's DPX's usage rate, I guess, because there's no member.
There's no member fee, right? There's no subscription. So ours is 25 basis points on both sides, on each side. Yeah. And that 25 basis point can go down to 5 basis points depending on how much usage you have. That's a whole complicated other thing. And again, it's one of those you only pay if you actually close and end up with checking your money in your pocket, et cetera, et cetera. And we can then guarantee compensation to both agents.
Yeah, that's
does a lot of things.
Way transparent. That's just the transparency is like
exactly
amazing.
The pushback
here, right?
I get is like, buyers are never going to pay this premium. I'm like, the buyers are the ones paying the commission today.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
they just don't know it. Yeah,
right. They just don't know it. So we'll see how it all plays out. What I can say is the one thing, and this was the reason why I had to disclose it. This now to me gets every brokerage out of any ongoing liability. Right? Because there's been no conspiracy, there's no NAR rule, right? The 5% is not them deciding, it's us as a auction company saying this is our price, right? And we're going to charge that price whether we're just going to charge that price, period, end of story. You don't like it, don't use our system, that's fine. So there's none of that. You completely escape liability, and at the same time, we can guarantee compensation to both agents.
Yeah.
To me, that's how we're going to roll out with this. Yeah. And for the listing agent, I do think it's going to be incredibly powerful for listing agents to be able to go to sellers and say, I'm not a discount agent. I'm not a stick a yard sign and then go away, right? I'm a full service agent. I'm going to negotiate for you. I'm going to market for you. I'm going to do photos. I'm going to do drone photography. And you're still going to pay 0%. I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty powerful value statement to consumers.
And we're time constrained here, but
yeah.
let me just give you and I appreciate you answering these things, and I'm kind of being my normal self here. But what I love about this, Rob, is that I've always thought, people can a lot of times say, I'm very critical of stuff and everything else, but that's because I've put myself out there with my applications and the way I view things, and I'm opening myself. Hey, I want to criticize your software. Well, now you can criticize mine.
That's right.
I love what you're doing here is you're now in the arena.
That's right.
You've been talking about these things for a long time.
That's right.
But it's like this thing, you're not a spectator anymore.
That's right.
You're not just this critic. You're in this game now.
I'm in the game, and you could come at me and be like, your software sucks.
That's such a better place to be in, coming from a thing of making things like, you know what, I'm putting my money where my mouth is, literally. Yep. And making this happen. So I'm, and it's very intriguing in this industry right now. It's so timely as far as that we need innovation, and I'm sure there'll be other kind of
I'm sure
other people come up with stuff.
Yeah,
but I'm congratulations. Thank you. It has been a while that we've been talking about this, and I know you've been like everybody struggling to kind of get things and making these decisions and everything else. But we'll have in the show notes all the links in there, but I think right now you did a post on Notorious,
on
right?
Yeah, on Notorious, which I moved to Substack. So it's notoriousrob.substack.com. Come check it out and let me know if you have questions. Thanks for letting me pitch my product.
Yeah, well, thanks for letting me ask my stupid questions.
That is all great questions. All right, man.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.